Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Conceal Confession Podcast, where we speak freely and heal deeply. It's your host, Demetria and Pretty. And as always, we hope everyone is feeling blessed and highly favored. Before we get started, don't forget to follow our social media handles: Facebook at Concealed Confession Podcast, IG and TikTok is Speak Freely, Heal Deeply. We would also like to shout out our sponsors, Storybox, Jordan Craig Apparel, and Blue Chew. Today we have a guest with us. We have Chip Foust. Chip, if you would like to introduce yourself and let everybody know about you.
Hello, I'm Chip Foust. I'm the president of the local NAACP here in Asheboro, and I'm also the president of the George Washington Carver Community Enrichment Center, also here in Asheboro.
So, can you tell us where you're originally from, a little bit about your history, your family?
I was born and raised here. I grew up here in Asheboro. I was here until I went to college. I went to A&T, Yankee Pride,
Okay.
and when I when it was time for me to have kids, I decided to come back here. I thought it would be a great place to raise kids, and I was right. It is a great place to raise kids. But like all places, it can be better. And the way that you make things better is that you become part of the community, and you keep pushing for things that need to be changed, and keep working until they get changed.
So you said that you're the president of the NAACP. What is that role? What does that consist of doing in this community?
Well, the NAACP has got a strong history here. Even back in the 1960s, when they were having the civil rights marches, many people don't know that they had sit-ins right here in Asheboro, where Hop's Barbecue is right now. People that we know, people that we go to church with, our aunts and grandparents. Some of them, they poured ammonia on them to get them out of the doorway, because they would just sit down in the doorway, because these restaurants, and it wasn't just Hops, it was every restaurant in town,
Oh,
refused
wow.
to serve black people.
Mm-hmm.
And so our people, our uncles, our parents, our grandparents, they went to jail because of that mistreatment. And those people were trained, and those people were organized by the NAACP at that time. And so we've been a part of this community for quite some time. We've done a lot, or we tried to do a lot, since I've been president. One thing to remember is that Randolph County they brag about the fact that they went 74, 75% for Donald Trump. So it's not a county that is easy to get involved with social justice and racial justice.
Yeah.
It's a county that is quick to deflect. For instance, well, I never owned a slave, so why should I care about this? Well, you benefit from
Yeah.
those slaves that were there, and we all do. I mean, we're doing a lot for Juneteenth because we want to honor our ancestors, but it's not. Juneteenth isn't a black holiday. When you look at this country was built on the labor, the sweat, and the lives of enslaved Africans. And so the New York Stock Exchange, for instance, okay, you trace the history back of those companies made their money in the beginning, in the 1850s and before, off of slave labor, right here in Asheboro. Every one of those slavers paid taxes. And every one of those taxes built the schools and built the roads and stuff that was there back then. So the foundation of the economy that we have today is based on the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors back then. And when you look at how great America is and how great America can be, for us to just act like, oh, we did it all by ourselves. We didn't have nothing to do with those people that were raped, or those parents that were taken from their ripped apart from their children over and over and over again. That's a distortion of history. And if we don't stand up and force America to be true to what America is, then that's a dishonor to those people who died so that we have the right to sit here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you mention some of the things that the NAACP has done in the past for the community? Especially, I really want to shed light on the banner that was made with all the slave names. I know it was a lot put into that.
Yeah. So we do a lot. I just got a phone call a few minutes before we came in here. A lot of what we do, we can't really talk about. We deal with parents that are having challenges with the school system. We deal with individuals that are having challenges with law enforcement, and we try to make sure that everyone understands their rights, and we try to help be a bridge. We've had sometimes, for instance, I don't. We had a young person that was at one of the schools, and the SRO. They said they had to arrest him, and they were like, the person came back and they were all bruised up. I mean, they were beaten pretty badly, and so. We went and we talked to the sheriff at the time, and we're like, "What's going on?" And the sheriff and them are like, "Well, this is just happens when you deal with law enforcement. This happens, and you guys got to understand that these things can go like this. This is just." And so we said, "Okay, so you're saying this is normal. This is what is normal." And they said, "Yeah, we hate that it happened, but that is normal." I said, "Cool, no problem. Go back 10 years. Go back 10 years and show me another mugshot of another 14-year-old whose face looks like that. Show me another," and it was a girl. "Show me another 14-year-old whose face looks like that." Because if you can't go back 10 years and you can't find anyone else who was treated like this, then you can't say it was normal. And the officer that got into that altercation got disciplined and got demoted. But should more have happened? Yeah, I think more should have happened, but here's the problem. We live in Randolph County. And when you live in a county that goes 75% for the people that are saying the officer didn't beat him enough, basically, then we have to be able to understand positive movement is positive movement. Yeah. So what happens a lot in Randolph County is we are here and then there's the goal. And if you don't get to the goal, then everybody says it's a failure and they get frustrated and they stop working. But if you started at 0 and the goal is 10 and you're at 4, right? Then you're 4, that's 4 steps that my daughter don't have to take when she takes up the mountain. That's 4 steps that the next generation doesn't have to take.
Yeah.
We got to keep moving forward no matter what. We got to keep moving forward. And you can't get frustrated. A lot of people got frustrated when Harris lost. A lot of people. I got frustrated when Harris lost. But if we allow that frustration to stop us from pushing for what we know is right, then the same problems we have today, my kids are going to have when they get my age. Yeah. And that's something, I don't know if I can even say it. It was something I saw on TV that really made sense. And they were talking about a war. And they were saying, when will this ever end? When will this ever end? And they said, you know what? If the people who are fighting to do what's right don't fight, it is never going to end. Mm-hmm. It's never going to end to the people who are fighting to do what's right stand up.
Yeah.
I just think it's sad that he actually said this is normal. Why is this a norm for y'all to be so aggressive with these kids? Like, that should not be a norm.
Emmett Till. A lot of these, it is normal. We down south. Yeah. That's why I'm just kind of sitting back listening because I'm from up top, so it's like a whole different thing. Yeah, it's a whole different vibe. So I will say, being out here, you get to see the melanin for what it is.
Oh yeah,
Look, Randolph County has got its problems, but it's everywhere, and it's America's culture is built on. See, think about this. All right, whether you own slaves or not, you were living there. If you were living in the 1850s, you were living around that, right? Mm-hmm. So why didn't the rest of the white people jump up and say, "Nah, man, you can't own this. This is crazy." Why didn't the rest of the white people jump up and say, "You can't be whipping her. You can't get off of that 13-year-old kid. Get off of that little girl like that. You can't do that." Why didn't they? Because from the time that they were born, they were brought up to believe that we weren't equal. That's how our economy. It wasn't just the slavers. It was the United States economy. It was built on slave labor, right? Yeah. And so how do you make that work? You make it work by getting the public to believe that it's in everybody's best interest that you do this, that you dehumanize these people. Mm. They have books. If you go to the Randolph County Library right now, they still have a copy of it. And it's a book that was forced reading in the 1920s up until like the 1960s. It's called The Young Person's Guide to North Carolina. Now, in this book, they talk about how Abraham Lincoln wasn't a good president. They talk about how the slaves were better off here than if they had been in Africa, if they had stayed in Africa. They have a whole chapter on how great the Ku Klux Klan was.
Wow, okay.
Because the Ku Klux Klan kept the black people in their place. So now imagine, now you think about it, 1940s, 1960s seems like a long time ago, but the teacher that's teaching history right now was probably taught by the person who was educated with that book when they
Yeah.
were growing up.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just here, because in the North they didn't own slaves. Well, they did in the beginning, but by the time the Civil War had happened, most northern states had already outlawed slavery in their state conventions, but they were still profiting from it. All that cotton that got picked down here had to get sold somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
The whole country was making money off of slave labor. And so, yeah, I think that the issue that we have right now in Randolph County, and I think maybe most places in the world, is you have 20% of the people who understand the issue and don't give a damn. I mean, 20% of the people who understand the issue and are willing to work. You got another 20% of the people who understand the issue, but they understand that they benefit from it, and they are willing to work to keep the status quo. And then you have 60% of the people who just don't give a damn either way.
Yeah.
And they're just apathetic. They don't care. And since they don't care, the goal that you have to do is you have to try and move enough of that 60% toward your way to try to move this country in the right direction. And it gets very challenging. We've sat down and talked to our county commissioners till you're blue in the face. They don't deny the facts of the case. We have a monument in front of our county courthouse where our county commissioners meet. So if you want to deal with your county government, you got to go to the county commissioners meeting. And in front of that county commissioners meeting at the old historic courthouse is a 30-foot tall statue honoring our Confederate heroes. Now, we said, that's probably not the best place for you to be honoring your Confederate heroes, where we have to go to meet our county commissioners. So that should be moved. Well, the public doesn't want us to move it, so we're not going to move it. Now, if that was a Nazi statue, it'd be moved. If it was an ISIS statue, it would be moved. And the Confederacy did much more damage to this area than the Nazis or ISIS did. When you look at it in their Constitution, now think about that. Think about what it takes to write a Constitution. It ain't something that you and I just sit down and put down on a sheet of paper. It's something that legislators from around the South, from Texas, Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, all of the legislators come together, and for months they write their Constitution, right? And in their Constitution, it is illegal for you to outlaw Negro slavery. So it's not one or two people made that decision. All of them together came in and said, we're going to join together and form a new country. And in this new country, slavery is going to be a part of this country, and there's nothing that either state can do to say that that's not true. Now think about this, because many people will tell you that the Civil War wasn't over slavery, it was over states' rights, right?
Yeah.
Well, if the state of Alabama were to be, if the Confederacy had won and the state of Alabama had said, well, doggone it, you know what, this slavery thing just ain't working out for us. I want to exercise my state's rights to say we're not going to have slavery anymore. The Constitution said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to keep slavery if you're going to be part of the Confederacy. Look at before the war started. Before the war started, the states did what's called Articles of Secession. These are the reasons why they want to leave the United States. And so the state of South Carolina said the reason we're leaving is because y'all elected a man to the office of president who is hostile to slavery. And you did it by letting black people vote, which goes against God. They're talking about some of the northern states where they let the black men, vote.
Yeah.
The state of Georgia said the preeminent reason we are leaving is to preserve slavery. Mississippi, these are you have people in Randolph County who will come to you and will say the only it's distortion. You know, they're lying. The people who win the war write the history. I heard that before. The people who win the war write the history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's in itself is a distortion because we're not going to what the historians are writing. We're going to what the legislators of Alabama and Florida and Texas, the people who actually wrote the laws and told us in writing why they were leaving, what they said, and all of them. Every one of them who put in writing why they were leaving the United States said they were leaving the United States to preserve slavery. Now, with that in mind, why do we have a 30-foot tall statue, the largest one in Randolph County, honoring our Confederate heroes, where you and I have to go and talk to and negotiate and try to get our county commissioners to work on our behalf? And how can they work on our behalf if they can't see how demoralizing it is for your county to support the people or honor the people whose purpose in life was to keep your ancestors enslaved? If they can't see that, how they gonna understand that we need a new road on East Side?
Yeah.
How they gonna understand one if they can't understand the other?
Oh, and
Exactly.
it took it as far as to use taxpayers' money to put a fence around it, like to protect it. Like, okay, then.
$40,000 of our money to protect it from, and I think it had been maybe defaced. Somebody put some graffiti on it once in 150 years. And the reason they did that is because more and more people are learning the truth. See, with the internet, you can't cover up a lie forever.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, the truth is going to come out. What we know right now about Randolph County, we know that during the Civil War, this county was very anti-Confederate. It was extremely anti-Confederate. They actually had a vote here. Do we want to stay in the United States? Do we want to join the Confederacy? Less than 50 people said we want to join the Confederacy. Over 2,500 people said we want to stay in the United States. The Confederacy itself, Robert E. Lee, supposed to be a great general. Have you guys ever heard of Robert E. Lee? Mm-hmm. Robert E. Lee was like the top general for the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee himself sent Confederate troops to Randolph County and circled the county because it was known back then that this was a haven for people who didn't want to fight in the war. If you can come out and just hide out in the mountains in Randolph County, it's people around here who will bring you food and stuff like that. And so there were no American troops. And this is something else too that's really, I'm going to show you the little mind games they play. It was not the North versus the South. No, it was the Confederacy versus America. So every time they talk about, oh yeah, it was us against them. No, you wanted out of the United States. So you were fighting the United States. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they try to just do that little twerk because they don't want to be who they actually were.
Yeah.
And but back to what I was saying about that, about the Confederacy, they executed people from this area. They shot, if they found people from this area who refused to join the Confederacy, they shot them or hung them. And that's people who are also dishonored by you putting a 30-foot statue up to the people who shot you and hung your ancestors. You know, the greatest award that you can get is the Presidential Medal of Freedom in this country. The first person from North Carolina to get that award was from Randolph County. He was a Trogdon, and he was from this area. They have a memorial to the Confederates, but they don't have no memorial to those people from Randolph County who fought for the United States.
That's crazy.
So you can't say it's a veterans memorial if you left off half the veterans.
Yeah.
You know? And so our belief is that it needs to be moved. It needs to be moved. Put it somewhere where people can honor their dead if they want to honor their dead. But if you're going to leave it where it's at, you're going to have to start telling the truth about it, or we're going to start telling the truth about it. There is a story to give you an idea of what slave life was like. Do y'all know what Linley Park School is?
That's my elementary.
Yeah, I went there too. Linley Park School, there used to be, back in the 1860s, 1850s, there was a, I guess, what do you call the guy who works with horseshoes and who an iron, I don't know, it was a farm there, right?
Okay.
And the guy bought a slave when she was 10. Her name was Edie. And by the time she was 14, we don't know what Edie had done. And this is, if you don't believe me, you can go look in the Register of Deeds office now because this paperwork is still there. Edie did something to piss this guy off. And what he did was he stripped her naked and he tied her to a stump. He chained her to a stump and he left her outside to die. Now, she still had to do her chores. Now, imagine if your job is to feed the chickens and you got to feed the chickens tied to a stump. You got to bring the stump around you everywhere you go.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
Butt naked, right? She's screaming for food. Now, how do we know she's screaming for food? Because the only reason there's a record of Edie is because the neighbors were complaining about her screaming so loud every night, asking for help. Notice didn't nobody come help, but screaming so loud, asking for her to come to help, that they put a disturbing the peace complaint against the landowner.
What?
Not only did he not get charged for her murder, because it wasn't murder, she was property, right? Not only did she not get charged for her murder, 2 years later, he was elected county clerk. The guy was elected county clerk. That's what slave life was like here. And you say, well, that wasn't everybody. Well, how many people have to be mistreated like that for you to move that damn statue?
Yeah.
And that wasn't the only case. You guys have heard of the jazz singer John Coltrane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
John Coltrane's family is from a slave plantation near Liberty. And that plantation had another disturbing the peace call. And that disturbing the peace call was the slave owner took one of the slaves and put him in the middle of the street and in front of everybody. He whipped him nonstop for over 3 hours. Whipped him nonstop for over 3 hours. And that was legal. There was absolutely nothing that happened to him. Now, you talk about the memorial. What we did with the memorial, because in this area, we were told that there were no slaves, that this was a Quaker area, and that that slaves, the people here didn't want slaves. Well, in 1860, 10% of the population were slaves. And so, yeah, the slave industry in Randolph County was robust. It wasn't as robust as it was in maybe the eastern part of the county, but if 10% of your population is enslaved, then a lot of your economy is coming off of slave labor. When Toyota gets here, you know how they talking about how they love Toyota and how everybody wants Toyota to come and how much economic impact Toyota is going to make, right? When Toyota gets here at full bore, it'll be 5% of the population. So if you can think about the economic impact of what Toyota is doing today at 5%, and it'll be 5% economic impact, imagine what 10% of a county being enslaved, what the economic impact of those slaves were. And we looked and we saw, if you go to the Register of Deeds office, you can actually see the deeds. It's not like a little printout. It's the actual handwritten cursive writing deeds. And you can see how people were. There was a young baby that was 11 months old that was bought in Randolph County. Now imagine there was one child that was bought that was so young, he was still being nursed by his mom, right? Sold to somebody else in Tennessee. Now imagine being that mother, where you're going to nurse this child, but you know that the minute that you stop nursing this child, they're going to take this child, and that child is going to Tennessee, and you're never going to see that child again. Because this is the 1850s. Ain't going to be no highways, ain't nothing.
Yeah.
When you going to see that child again? How you going to get to Tennessee? How you even going to know what Tennessee is? 'Cause you ain't, they'll shoot people for learning to read and write, right? That's the life that our ancestors endured for everybody to have the opportunities that we have today, and to repay them for that service to our country. We have decided to put a 30-foot statue up honoring the people who would kill Americans to keep them enslaved, because that's what the Confederacy was. Confederates killed Americans in order to enslave others. That's
So
their
can I
whole.
ask you a question?
Yeah.
I know when the George Floyd march and everything was going on, a lot of counties were removing their statues. Why is it such a big issue for Randolph County to remove theirs, but a couple counties had removed theirs?
Because 74% of the county votes one way.
But why do you think, that's what I'm saying, why do you think that it's such a big deal for them, like, to keep it there?
Because if I have the power, all right, and if my power is rooted in ignorance, then it's to my benefit to keep you ignorant.
Yeah.
Okay? So if I have 75% of the votes and those people are believing, and those people were brought up to believe that the Confederacy wasn't over slavery, that the South was right. It was the Northern invaders. The South was right, and we didn't do anything wrong, and we were just protecting our homelands, which, by the way, is another lie. You got people right here, right now, who have owned their farms and owned their land since the Revolutionary War. So if the United States was coming and was going to take everybody's land, why didn't they take none of these people's land? But that rationale, besides the fact that these people were brought up and taught the same thing I showed you in that book, The Young People's Guide to North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
So if you were brought up and you were taught and you benefit financially, right, from the belief that we didn't do anything wrong, that the slaves were better off than if they had been over in Africa, that the South wasn't the aggressor, and that it wasn't over slavery, right? Then what happens? Why? Then you're afraid to change. You're afraid to change. The truth. They say the truth will set you free. Well, some people feel a little nervous about that because if I built my whole existence on the lie, then it makes me nervous to hear the truth. Now, but that's fear and that's ignorance. See, to me, I think America is better than that. I don't think we have to lie about the mistakes that we made in the past. I think we say, you know what, we did, but we grew from it. The same American army that went out and supported slavery before the Civil War is the same American army that went down to Houston and told the slaves in Houston, hey, slavery ended 2 years earlier. The reason we have Juneteenth is because of United States troops. We're able to grow, and we're able to learn from mistakes, and we're able to move forward. But you can't learn from mistakes until you admit them. Yeah. If you're not going to admit that mistake, you're going to keep making it over and over and over again. In 1954, the Supreme Court passed a law that said the schools had to be desegregated because separate but equal doesn't work, right? That was 1954. In 1964, in Asheboro, North Carolina, they're still voting on whether or not to integrate the schools. 10 years after the Supreme Court told them they had to, they still not doing it. So when the county commissioners come to us and they say, well, the public doesn't want the monument moved, the public doesn't want it moved. Well, we need commissioners with who, and these people, they claim to be Christian, right? But if we had said in 1954, I want y'all to take a vote. Can black people and white people eat in the same restaurant together? Can y'all take a vote? What do you think the vote would have been? Right?
You would have stoned us.
Yeah, but that's my point. So if we're just going to go off popular opinion, then the lie is allowed to stand. But if you are an elected official and you know the truth, you got to act on the truth. And right now, they're not doing that. They're not doing that at all.
So with you being an activist, and I mean, you might not be an elected official in the county.
Shit, you got my vote.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're important to our community. What are some of the goals that you have for Asheboro? What are some of the plans that you have for us? Like what is how is your future for
what's the future you see for Asheboro?
Yeah. Well, the main two things that we want to look at. Well, the main three things that we want to look at are education, law enforcement, and moving that damn monument. Okay, and let's look at law enforcement. A few years ago, the Courier Tribune did an article, and in that article, they looked at the state data, and they showed that black people are stopped 3 times as often in Randolph County than white people, 3 times more often. And when they searched the cars, they found stuff more often in the white cars than in the black cars. So, and it's like black people would be stopped. Now we make up.
I got pulled for a tag cover being too dark.
Yeah,
And then
Yeah.
he pulled up to the car and said, "Oh, now I smell marijuana.
yeah.
Now let me check the car." What? I got my babies in here. Of course, he checked and nothing's going on. But the whole reason for the stop was, oh, your tag cover is too dark. So
It's. I don't think there's a black person. I know there probably ain't a black person in the South. I know everyone that I went to school with has stories like that. I know everybody has a story of how you just got pulled over. Me and my cousin were driving to Florida on 95, and yeah, I was speeding. I was speeding. It was on 95. I get pulled over. I'm speeding. Yeah, you got me. Can we search your car? Wait a minute now. I was just speeding.
Yeah,
I was just speeding. Well, can we search your car? I said, what, buddy? I tell you what. If I let you search the car and you don't find nothing, can you throw away that speeding ticket? Right? He said, nah, you got the speeding ticket either way. Oh, well then you can't search the car.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the police dog just arrived while I was talking to you and he sniffed something, and so now we gotta search the car. And so now he said the police dog sniffed something on the driver's side car door. Y'all, there wasn't nothing in the car, right? But okay, then you can search the driver's side car door. No, we were going on a cruise. They took all of our luggage out of the car, took all of the luggage out of the luggage, didn't find anything, said have a nice day, and left everything on the side of the road.
Oh no, put my stuff back in my suitcase. What you doing?
Yeah, no, they were playing the averages. They were playing the averages. And that's, well, let me say this. That could be why we're stopped more often than other people are stopped. It's because people are playing the averages. Now, if that's the case, what has to happen is we as a people have got to let law enforcement know, no, you don't get to play the averages.
Yeah.
You don't get to play the averages. We're gonna have to start writing reports and start documenting. That's one of the main things that we've been doing lately is when we get a phone call from a person that feels like they've been mistreated, one of the first things we're gonna do is we're gonna document what happened. And that way what we can do is, what's your name?
Cheyenne.
If you call me up and you say this law enforcement or this officer stopped me for absolutely no reason because he said I had a dark tint. Well, was it dark or wasn't it? If it was too dark, then you got to work on that. If it wasn't too dark, we want to document that. We want to document that, right?
Yeah.
And the reason we want to document that is because we want to make sure that the police department was on notice that officer so-and-so stopped you for a bogus reason. We want to make sure they're on notice that happened.
Yeah.
And nothing else may happen from that, right? But guess what's going to happen? People are creatures of habit, right? So what happens when Demetria gets stopped for some bogus reason? And we document that. Now we can go back to law enforcement and we can say, hey, we're starting to see a pattern here. We're starting to see a pattern here. And even if we can't do anything about it, the third person can may be able to bring in some help. Now it's looking to a lawyer like, hey, maybe Asheboro got a problem. And now maybe Asheboro might need to get hit in their pocketbook.
And like you said earlier, we got social media.
Yeah. So what happens there is we're able to build a case, basically. But so one of the main things that we want to work on is we want to work not just with law enforcement, but with the community as well. There's no reason why we should be being stopped more often.
What you saying that working with law enforcement in the community, I feel like a big issue with Asheboro is that when I was growing up, a lot of the law enforcement like Cox, Hill, Vincent, they were in the community. They actually got to know the people of the community. They weren't just pulling them over. Like these new cops that they got, they're all young. They're younger. A lot of them are younger than me, and they don't know. They don't y'all. You put them in an area that they're not used to, so they don't know how to handle those people. You have to be in the community. You can't just be sitting out here putting laws on people and expecting people to follow laws when you're not even trying to have build a relationship with them. Because people are going to be, be against you and not wanting to work with you. They're going to run from you.
Because I know the officers that worked at the school, those were the same ones that I would see whenever I was at work. They'll come and check on me. And they got to know me on first name basis and actually got to know my family, actually gave a damn. So,
but these new cops don't. It's just
they
do my
don't.
job and go home.
Well, I think I think that what we have to do though is we got to talk to administration, because we have had a lot of help from the Asheboro Police Department. Not as much from the county, but we've had a lot of help from the Asheboro Police Department to try to fix the situations, right? One issue is money. We're not paying what Greensboro's paying. We're not paying what Charlotte's paying. And so the more seasoned officers can go someplace else and make more money.
Yeah.
Well, while that's true, it's also true that it's been that way for the last 50 years.
Not paying
So-
that high, they getting these cars, these brand new
part,
police cars. Cause I just seen a Mustang like three days ago.
All these undercover cars, all nice undercover cars.
Yeah,
too,
undercover
so
Mustang 3 days
what y'all spending
ago.
your money on?
Yeah,
But they don't got no
that's a
money.
good point. That's a valid point. That is a very valid point. And that's something that we do have to work on. And I will say we've been able to work more with the city. I do want to point that out, because I don't the statistics that I'm pointing out. We were able to get the city police from July of 2023. 2023, excuse me, to July of 2024. With the request of the NAACP, they cataloged every stop that they made, and they were able to show us who got stopped, was it white, black, Asian, what did they find, right? What did they find in the stops, right? And the reason that we're looking at that is because we want to see if there was any bias. And I'm going to tell you what, this isn't the current chief, the last chief told us. It said, yeah, Chip, we're stopping them 3 times as often. That is true. We can't deny that. But the reason that we're stopping them isn't racial. And the reason it's not racial is because we use something called a hit rate, right? And so our officers are trained on how to make a stop. And they go by this procedure. And in that procedure, if you look at the hit rate, Chip, we normally find stuff about 48% of the time, white or black. And so since the hit rate is equal, then it's not racial. That's what they told us. And this is what we said. We said, okay, well, hold on. What defines a hit?
Yeah.
Right? Because a hit could be.
I don't even like the name of that.
But what did he say to you? Oh, I smell marijuana.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a hit?
about to say,
Is
is
the
that your
smell?
hit?
Is that a smell of marijuana? Does that constitute a hit? And does 50 automatic weapons in the trunk? Is that a hit?
Yeah.
And so we were able to look at the drugs that were brought in, the guns that were confiscated, the drugs that were confiscated, to see exactly what our city police was using to look at the hits. And it's still showing up. It's still showing up that we're getting stopped more often, and they're actually finding stuff. They're finding stuff at us like 10% less the time that they actually do a search. 10% fewer times than the white counterparts, and we only make up 10% of the population, right? And so I'm saying that to say what we're doing is working with the police department to try to get a full understanding. Like, I'm telling you, next time we talk to them, we bring it up what you guys just said. Matter of fact, I'd love to have you two in the room with us, because I would love for them. Hey, we talked about why we don't have, because we wanted more diversity. Why we don't have more diversity in law enforcement, and you guys told me something that sounded really good. You said that, look, Chip, we don't pay what these other people are paying, so we don't get to keep the same number of people. And I'm telling people that, and they turn around like, well, y'all sure did get them new Mustangs real quick. Y'all sure did get them new cars real quick. How can you pay for that? And you need to be in the room when they answer that, right?
Because I need to hear that response.
Yeah, yeah. And we need to get that response.
Why y'all got people
Right.
sleeping on the floor in the jail? Please explain that to me.
Yeah, now that's the sheriff. So you got the sheriff and you got the police
Yeah, the
department.
sheriff department need to fix their stuff too, honey. Because
Yeah.
there's no reason why people should be sleeping on the floor. It's bad enough y'all got them in them thin jumpsuits and them thin mattresses. Why they sleeping on the floor? That don't make no sense. Y'all need to have a heart.
Yeah.
People do crimes, yeah, but they still humans too.
And they're in jail. When you're in jail, that means you haven't been tried yet. So you're not talking about a guilty individual.
You
You're
know what I'm
talking about
saying?
a person that is being accused of a crime. And so you don't want to treat a prisoner, you don't want to treat an innocent man like he's a convicted felon,
And like you
and we're
That's
said,
what I
have
all
a
want to know. I
heart.
want to know what the budget is. I want to know what the jail budget is. How much
Yeah.
money are y'all supposed to be putting towards these people's food and taking clothing, sanitary beans? Because the way the stories that I be hearing,
Especially the
them going 3 and 4
females.
days without taking a bath, them not being
Yeah.
able to having the same meal over and over. Like they don't even have different dinners. You know what I'm saying? The breakfast that they eat like that is sad.
But it was
Like
something that you said earlier. You said about having a heart. That's one thing about when it comes to joining any type of like police or because I wanted to be a crime scene analyst. But one thing you have to do is you have to deassociate. You have to be able to deassociate yourself, detach yourself from the
yeah, but you
scene,
still
from
have to
the
be
person.
human.
Yes, but how can you be human if you have to dissociate yourself? If you have to detach, like, is that even possible
I
for you to
don't know. I
still?
feel like if I did a crime, I would put yourself in that person's shoes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they did the crime, but do you really think that it's humane to make a person sleep on the floor in a thin jumpsuit?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, Dimitri, you got people. Have you ever heard of a guy named Sheriff Arpaio out of
no.
Arizona, out of Phoenix, Arizona? He used to put everybody in tents. Now, in Arizona, it'd be 110 degrees, easily 110 degrees, and he put people in tents, and they ate bologna and cheese. I mean, bologna. I'm not bologna. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, and he gets reelected over and over again. There's a section of our society that wants that type of treatment, and we got to understand that. That's why we got to stand up and say that you can want that. That can sound good to you, but if it's inhumane, it's inhumane. It's
Yeah.
wrong. Period. It's wrong. Period. We got to get to the bottom of that. If they're spending, but now we also got to understand that we now have an administration that's cutting that funding. Oh no, these prisoners are living high off the hog, and so we're going to cut that funding so that we can use this money someplace else.
Yeah, they feel like they're in prison anyway. So,
We just
and that's
got
not right.
we just got George Floyd's anniversary, right? So when George Floyd was when Chauvin was convicted, right? The Obama administration, they put in, I forget the name of it, but they put in a set of standards, right, that they need the Minneapolis Police Department to adhere to, right? And because this is a problem, right? Minneapolis is saying, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we think this is right. This is right. Now they're reversing those standards now. They're taking those standards back. There's even talk about getting Chauvin either a new trial or having his case thrown out. So voting is probably the most important thing that we can do. We can't have apathy. We can't just sit down and say, I'm not going to win, so I'm just going to throw my hands up and leave it alone, because what we've seen right now is that if we choose not to vote, they will take advantage of our
Yeah.
Yeah.
silence. They will definitely take advantage of our silence. And we've got to get more active. We've got to get more active. Not just in law enforcement, the same thing is in the school system. The same thing is in the school system. And again, we've worked with Asheboro City Schools, and they're doing a lot to try to fix problems that they acknowledge are problems, right? When you look at the NAACP, the state NAACP just did a survey, and we looked at black proficiency in reading and black proficiency in math. And so they listed all of the schools in the state that had a 50% proficiency for the black students. And we ain't make the list. We ain't make the list on none of the schools made the list, not even down to third grade and fourth grade. Now, remember this about third grade. Hillary Clinton said that in Arkansas, when they wanted to figure out how many prisons they need to build in the future, they look at the third grade reading proficiency. And when they look at the third grade reading proficiency, if it's low, then they know they need to build more prisons. If it's high, then they know they don't need to build as many. So when you look at Asheboro's third grade reading proficiency for black kids, right, since COVID, it's been hanging around 25, 26%. And I think it went up last year. No, year before last, it went up to like 27%. And then last year, it went back down to 25%. Well, we've got two different trains of thought. You've got the Asheboro City Schools is saying, Chip, this is a problem. This is a problem. We'll show you the data. Help us figure out how to help these students. How can we fix this, right? But you have other school systems, and other school systems are like, look, I teach the same way to everybody. Everybody learns the same thing, and so if you don't get it, you don't get it. And that's. But don't you understand that our country now is trying to get away from diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why the push is going to hurt us so much more than it's going to hurt anybody else. You learn differently than I learned.
Yeah.
And it's not about all of us getting an A. It's about all of us knowing the information at the end of
Exactly.
the day. And if I have to teach you how to do something differently than I have to teach you, my job as a teacher is that both of y'all lead this class knowing that information. And if you get rid of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, then when you're getting rid of that opportunity for the kid that doesn't learn the same way the majority learns to get an education. And that's who's that going to hurt? When those kids drop out of school, where they going?
The streets.
Whose streets?
Our
They
streets.
come exactly. They
Yeah.
coming. So we have to vote. We have to vote. We have to say that we want to fund. You know what schools need right now? They need some mental health.
Yeah.
Our students need some mental health. COVID was a hard hit
it was.
across the board. COVID was a hard hit. And if we don't get our students some mental health, some professional mental health, not just talking to the gym teacher,
Yeah, I know.
but some professional mental health, we're going to be dealing with adults that are going to have the same trauma going down the road. And if we could spend a little bit on what we spend on other things. Right now, they're going to cut the mental health. Right now, they're going to cut Medicaid. They're going to cut SNAP. How you gonna take food? I was at an event, and they were talking about one of the best things that we could do to really get test scores up. You know what the main thing that these professional educators said? The main thing that would get test scores up? Free food. It don't matter what the students' GPA is or what the parents' income is. Just feed every kid that walks through the door breakfast and lunch. Feed every one of them that come through the door breakfast and lunch, and you'll watch test scores go up. We got the money. We could do that. We could do it, but we're not. We're not doing that. And that creates that mindset of you're giving them too much. You're giving them too much.
That's heartbreaking because some of them kids, that's the only meal that they actually get in that day.
Exactly.
And those, summertime packages, that's really all they get, and that's heartbreaking.
Exactly. And but it's going to stay that way. And I'm sorry, it's not just going to stay that way. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Unless we stand up. And
Those are going to be the generations forever cursed if we don't stand up.
right.
Yeah.
We got to be boisterous. We got to show up at these school board meetings. We got to show up at these city council meetings, these county commissioners meetings with an agenda. And our agenda is that we need law enforcement to respect us the same way they respect other parts of the community. We need the school system. If there's no reason, if a black child and a white child in Asheboro go to the same elementary school, go to the same middle school, and go to the same high school, there's no reason why for the last 30 to 40 years, white kids have been getting the numbers in terms of reading proficiency and writing proficiency and math proficiency that are so much higher. We all went to the same schools. So there's something in the network that isn't working. Now, some people are going to say, well, yeah, look at the family. I'm not saying don't look at the family. I'm not saying that it's all the school's fault. Matter of fact, I'm saying from what I have personally seen, I have personally worked with Asheboro City Schools, and I know that there is a deep desire to try and fix these issues. But I also know the issues ain't fixed, right?
Yeah.
And so since the issues ain't fixed, how can we fix them? And if it is partly the family, then let's take that head on. What is it that we can do as a community? Right. One of the things that we were trying to do is we're trying to have classes where parents can come in and can get some guidance on how to talk to teachers. One of the things, we have an after school program at our school. I mean, at the community center, George Washington Carver Community Enrichment Center, and it's called the Carver Arts Academy, and it's an after school program for middle school students. And by the way, if you know of a kid that's going to be in middle school next year, they should definitely get involved with this. It only costs $100 for the year, $25 every 3 months, and they get personalized curriculum help. What does that mean? It means that the instructors talk to the teachers. So the instructors at the after school academy talk to the teachers that they deal with every day, and they say, okay, Johnny is a little low on math, and Susie, she needs some help with reading, right? And then their curriculum at the academy is based on their deficiencies in school, and the goal is to get everybody up to the point to where they're some of the top students at the school the following year. And so that's one of the things that we're doing to try to address the situation. But the other things that we can do is we can sit there and we can say, if the problem to have more diversity in the classroom is money, then y'all are going to have to find more money, because that's the problem that you've had for the last 40 to 50 years. And I'm not talking to the school system. Now I'm talking to the legislature, right? We need a diverse classroom. And if we can't get a diverse classroom, we are going to keep having the numbers that we're having. And so we need a diverse classroom, and we need you guys to be able to fund a diversity in the classroom.
Yeah.
What is the reason? Why is it that they can have diversity in all these other places in the state, Chapel Hill, Greensboro, even what's the little county beside us, Davidson County?
Yeah.
Even those places can have diversity in the classroom, but then we don't have it because we're not paying what other people are paying. Well, that can't be an excuse that works 5 or 6 years down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the school system is using it as an excuse. I'm saying that can't be the reason. Right? If money was the problem in year one, and money was the problem in year two, and money was the problem in year three, year 4, 5, and 6, if you haven't done anything to address the problem, then one of the problems is administration don't give a damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, we're getting a little close to our time. I don't want to cut you off, but I know it was a couple things that you wanted to mention that were coming up this summer. If you want to run it down, you said there was a Juneteenth 3-day event coming up. If you want to give more details about that.
Yeah, Juneteenth this year is really going to be amazing. The first thing we're doing is something that you alluded to. We went to the Register of Deeds office, and we found the deeds to over 1,000 enslaved individuals in Randolph County.
Oh, wow.
And if you remember what we talked about before, these are the individuals whose lives literally built the economy that we benefit from to this day. I don't care if you're white, black, Asian, Latino. If you live in Randolph County, it is because of the work and sweat of these individuals. It's over 1,200 of them. As a matter of fact, we're about to build a new one because they've just found another 150 names that aren't on the list, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but we created this 100-foot long, 8-foot tall memorial, and that memorial lists all of the names that we found. It lists the dates that they were sold. It lists how much they were sold for.
Oh my
God! And
this thing is massive. Like it's huge. Like it's very detailed. It's beautiful.
Can I ask just one question?
Yeah.
What's the lowest price?
There were 13-year-old girls that were given to grown men as Christmas presents. Mm-hmm. There were 8-year-old girls that were given.
That's what I was about to say. I remember when we had NAACP had an event that you had told that there was an 8-year-old little girl that was sold to a 16-year-old boy as a birthday present. Like that like when he said that, it seared in my head.
I asked that question to prove your point.
Yeah.
And that's sad that's possible.
And that happened. Some of the saddest ones were people who, if you owned slaves and she owned the local sawmill, whatever, and you borrowed money so that you could pick up the supplies that you needed and couldn't pay, if you couldn't pay your bills as a slave owner, the sheriff in Randolph County, and this was all over the South, it wasn't just in Randolph County, but the sheriff didn't come to your house, right? He came to one of your slaves' houses. Imagine being at home with your wife and your 2 kids, and the sheriff comes in and takes your daughter because somebody didn't pay their bills, and now your daughter belongs to the guy up the street.
That's crazy.
And that happened literally hundreds of times. You'll see it. Now, one other thing that you'll see in these slave deeds, there were churches here that would buy a bunch of slaves and would send them to Indiana and Ohio and say no man should own another. So these churches would buy freedom for these slaves, and they would send them up to the northern states. And some of those slaves, imagine this. Now, I know where Indiana is. Imagine walking from Indiana to Boston, Massachusetts. They walked. It was a family, the Lydell family. They walked from Indiana to Massachusetts and joined the United States Army and came back down here to fight for freedom. And that happened here, but there's no record of it. There's no we know that because of the families. The families were able to pull up in their church Bibles and their family Bibles and stuff like that. But yeah, the first thing we're going to do is at 10 o'clock on June 19th, we're going to have an opening ceremony, and we'll actually have the mayor will be in town. The mayor will come, and he's going to lay a wreath at that memorial, and then the memorial will be open from 9 in the morning to 8 at night, that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And now this is the first year we're doing this next thing, and it's the most exciting thing that I think I've ever been a part of. We get to eat what we want to eat in this town because of the individuals who sat in at Hop's Barbecue, like I was talking about, where they had ammonia poured on them and were arrested and marched. Well, we are going to find as many of those individuals who are still living, and we're going to present them with the Randolph County Civil Rights Medal of Freedom. And so they're going to come across the stage, and we're going to put a medal around their neck because it's important. We don't get to tell Edie, that 14-year-old girl that was starved to death and killed, how much what she did was for us. We don't get to say that to Edie.
Yeah.
But we do get to say it to the people that are still living today who were part of the change that made our whole country better. And so at 6 o'clock, bring a lawn chair, come out in front of the memorial, and we've already found some, but we're trying to find as many as we can. So if you know of anybody who was part of the civil rights movement, here's the criteria. If they live here now and were part of the civil rights movement, we want them. If they live here now and were part of the civil rights movement outside of the county, we still want them because those people helped change our country. And if they don't live here now, but they were a part of the civil rights movement in Randolph County, we still want to honor them. And so we're bringing all of those people together. We're going to honor them. We're going to let some of them tell their stories. And that's at 6 o'clock.
So that's on June 20th, right?
That's on June 20th. That's a Friday, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And then on Saturday, we have a very heartwarming event, and that's a march. For people who don't know, in the 1960s, when they were preparing to march and when they were preparing to do the sit-ins, before they would actually do it, they would pray at Greater St. John's Baptist Church on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. And so that's where they would pray at, and that's where they would train at before they actually started the marching and the nonviolent protests, right? Mm-hmm. And so this year, for the third year in a row, we're going to start a march, and we march from Greater St. John's Baptist Church to the Slave Memorial. And as we march, we call out the names of those 1,235 slaves that are on that wall. And we talk about the things that we found about them, like the 8-year-old girl that was given away, or the boy that was sold 3 times in 1 year, right? And so that march is very powerful. And now another thing, if you know somebody that's in the Girl Scouts, that's really cool. The local Girl Scouts have reserved the Sunset Theater, and they have Girl Scout troops from around the state that are coming to Randolph County on that day at the Sunset Theater, and they're taking 3 or 4 of the ladies that were part of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And those ladies are going to stay on stage, and those young girls are going to get to hear from actual people who were part of the civil rights movement, what it was like to live in Randolph County or during Jim Crow during that time. So I think that's a beautiful thing that the Girl Scouts have been a part of. And then the last thing we're doing is the African Heritage Ball, where we're going to have African dancers and drummers.
Ready for this, girl.
And
Hey,
everybody,
you know I got my outfit ready.
Everybody is going to be in their finest African regalia, and we're going to have fun. But they don't just dance; they also talk about the significance behind the moves, and they talk about the significance of the drums. Like, I didn't realize that there are certain drums that they will use for certain events and
for
things.
real? I didn't know that either.
And so they go over that and they talk about that. And another thing that we're doing is those individuals that are part of the civil rights movement are all getting honored, and they're honored guests at the African Heritage Ball. So the NAACP has joined with GWCC, and we've reserved tables just for those individuals so that they can come in and they don't have to pay to get in.
African
So it's
Heritage Ball.
yeah, the African Heritage Ball. You guys got to be there. I know.
I'm definitely
I will be there.
Yeah.
My date right here.
Well, Chip, that's the end of our time. I want to thank you
Okay.
for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for the history lesson. Honestly,
Thank
it's
you.
a lot of things that you told me today that you have told me, but it's
I
some
have
things that I haven't heard
chills,
at all.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
again, thank you guys for joining us on this
Thank
journey
you.
through the hidden corners of our human hearts. This has been Concealed Confessions. We are more than just a podcast. It's a space for honesty, healing, and hope. And together we hope that we'll be able to uncover the power of truth and the freedom that comes with letting go. Until next time, guys. Thank you.
See ya.
See you later.